Welcome to another video lecture. This one is going to focus on Africa. Now our question is going to be, how did Ethiopia defeat Italy in the Battle of Adwa? Ethiopia is a country in East Africa. Some of my favorite food comes from there. I absolutely love Ethiopian food, and if you ever get the chance to try it, try it. You only eat it with your hands, no utensils. It's wonderful, delicious. Anyway, it's a country in East Africa. Can you tell I'm very hungry when I'm saying that? One of only two nations to never be colonized by a European nation. In the map I'm about to show you in just a moment, you're going to see that almost all of Africa was colonized by European countries. What does that mean? It means, just like we were talking about in the last lesson with Britain or England colonizing India, it's the same thing for Africa, that these European countries are going to try and just really take over and dominate. And Ethiopia is one of the few countries in Africa that was never colonized, the other one being Liberia. Okay? Now, to understand this, we've got to look at the actual battle and everything that led to the battle. So, take a look at this picture I have for you here. So this is a painting of the Battle of Adwa, which was painted by an unknown Ethiopian artist. The exact date of the painting is unknown, but the battle was fought between Ethiopia and Italy on March 1st, 1896. It lasted one day, and it was a decisive victory for Ethiopia. Ethiopians are very proud about winning at the Battle of Adwa. You mention it to them, they love it. It's their trophy that they can say, look, we defeated a European power. Nobody else could, but we did it. Now, the battle was significant because it marked the biggest African victory over a European army in the 19th century. The battle helped keep Ethiopia, or Abyssinia, one of the only parts of Africa to remain independent during the scramble for Africa in the second half of the 19th century, a time when European powers established colonies across most of the African continent. For the record, those countries are Great Britain, France, Belgium, not so much Spain, but a little bit of Portugal, the Netherlands, Italy, and Germany. These are the countries that are primarily trying to take over parts of Africa. Most of it, I would say, when we look at we'll see when we look at the map, but most of it was France. They do a lot of colonizing in Africa. Why do they want to colonize Africa, by the way? Why would you want to do this? The same reason the British wanted India. Resources, natural resources, minerals, and things like salt, gold, spices, ore, things that could be used and made made into goods, things that had value for trade. So this is why people wanted Africa, in the same way that Britain wanted India in the last lesson. Our question today is, how was Ethiopia able to defeat the Italian army at the Battle of Adwa and stay independent? Well, to address this question, we're going to have to look at three different textbook accounts. Two of them are going to be American, and one's going to be Ethiopian. So our primary objective for the day is to compare and contrast, or really corroborate, the information across these different textbooks. So part of our job is to identify what these accounts have in common and how they're different. So let's take a look at a world history textbook from 2006. Ethiopian independence. Only the African nation of Ethiopia was able to retain its independence by matching European firepower. In 1889, the Emperor of Ethiopia, Menelik II, undertook a program of modernization that included a modern army. So let's stop there. It says that they matched European firepower. In other words, the Europeans have a lot of weapons. Ethiopia did the same thing in stockpiling and gathering weapons. And it sounds like their emperor made that the focus of his time being the emperor. He wanted to upgrade the army. He wanted to upgrade the weaponry. In 1895, so that's a year before the battle, Italian forces invaded Ethiopia over a treaty dispute. Within a year, however, Menelik's forces, more numerous, meaning there were more of them, and better armed than the Italians, defeated the Italians at the Battle of Adwa. So, according to this, Menelik focused on improving his army and improving their weapons, but Ethiopia won this battle because there were more of them and they were better armed. It also probably doesn't hurt that the fighting was in Adwa, it was in Ethiopia, and that sort of gives this home advantage to the Ethiopians. It's a lot harder for the Italians to come in and be the occupying force. Okay, so this textbook has some very clear reasons for why they were able to win the Battle of Adwa, or the Ethiopians were able to win it. So let's find out what the other textbooks have to say. Go to Document A, American textbook. Ethiopia, a successful resistance. Now the year for this is also 2006, but this is a different world history textbook from the United States of America. Ethiopia was the only African nation that successfully resisted the Europeans. Its victory was due to one man, Menelik II. He became emperor of Ethiopia in 1889. He successfully played Italians, French, and British against each other, all of whom were striving to bring Ethiopia into their spheres of influence. Okay, so stop right there. They make it sound like Menelik II does a very good job of playing the British, the French, and the Italians against each other. It's sort of like if I want to get a loan and I pit different banks against each other for who I'm going to get the loan from. That's one way of like sort of playing your the position you're in, okay? Keep reading. In the meantime, he built up a large arsenal of modern weapons purchased from France and Russia. Okay, that's huge. He bought a huge arsenal of modern weapons from France and Russia. So the Ethiopians are getting the same weapons that are used in Europe at the time by most of the major superpowers, Great Britain, France, and all of that. In 1889, shortly after Menelik had signed a treaty with Italy, he discovered differences between the wording of the treaty in the Ethiopian language and in Italian. Aha! So Menelik realizes that the treaty isn't saying the same thing in both languages, that it's sort of hiding things in the Italian one that it wasn't saying in the Ethiopian one. Menelik believed he was giving up a tiny portion of Ethiopia. However, the Italians claimed all of Ethiopia as a protectorate. Meanwhile, the Italian forces were advancing into northern Ethiopia, so Menelik declared war. All right, so before we go any further, it sounds like in Italian they were saying that Italy gets most of Ethiopia, whereas in the Ethiopian translation it was just a small portion of Ethiopia that the Italians were getting. Keep reading. In 1896, in one of the greatest battles in the history of Africa, the Battle of Adwa, Ethiopian forces successfully defeated the Italians and kept their nation independent. After the battle, Menelik continued to stockpile rifles and other modern weapons in case another foreign power challenged Ethiopia's liberty. So it just goes on to say that in the battle that they won, and a lot of the reason was because Menelik had played these European nation states against each other, and that he had bought a large modern arsenal from Russia and from France. So it's not like they were dealing or using inferior weapons. You might notice there when it said the Battle of Adwa, they added an O. I spell it A-D-W-A because that's how Ethiopians spell it, so that's what I'm going to stick with. But if you want to add the O, that's fine. That's your prerogative. Go to the next document here, Document B, Ethiopian textbook. And this Ethiopian textbook is from 2006 as well. But remember, this is from an Ethiopian perspective. So I'm very curious to hear what they have to say. The American textbook told us one thing. Let's see what this says. Foreign relations with Italy. Menelik had very close relations with foreign nations, especially with Italy. The relationship between Italy and Ethiopia began as a friendly one, but it deteriorated after the Treaty of Ucheo, I think that's how that's pronounced, was signed between them in 1889. The cause of the conflict was Article 17 of the Ucheo Treaty, which was written differently in Amharic and Italian. I'm guessing Amharic was the language used by Ethiopians at the time. The Amharic version says that Ethiopia could use the services of Italy in her foreign relations with Europe. The Italian version bound Menelik to make all of his foreign decisions through Italy. Menelik asked Italy to change the Italian version of Article 17, and Italy refused. As a result, Menelik rejected the entire treaty. Thus, when peaceful methods of trying to occupy Ethiopia failed, the Italian government began preparation to occupy Ethiopia by force. In 1895, the Italians invaded Ethiopia in the north. In the same year, 1895, Menelik declared war on Italy and marched northwards to fight the Italians. There's one major difference here between what the American textbook said and what the Ethiopian textbook is saying. It's not that Menelik was angry that he had to give up all of Ethiopia as a protectorate as opposed to a small part. This says that Ethiopia could use Italy in dealing with other European nations, that Italy's relationship with those other nations could be used. So like if Ethiopia wanted to talk to France or Great Britain, they could use the relationship that they had with Italy, and they could use some of their resources to do this. But it says the Italian version said that Menelik had to make all of his foreign policy decisions through Italy. In other words, Italy had to approve all of the Emperor of Ethiopia's foreign policy decisions. Well, that's like having the president not make his own decisions. There's another country on top that the president has to run everything by. I can understand why Menelik didn't want to do that. And so this is the one difference between the American textbook and the Italian textbook, is what Menelik is upset about. I don't blame Menelik for being upset with the Italians trying to control him. The American textbook made it sound like it was about controlling land, but the Ethiopian textbook says it's about controlling Menelik's actions. Okay, keep reading. The Battle of Adwa, 1896. The Battle of Adwa was fought in March 1896 between the Ethiopian army commanded by Menelik and the Italian army commanded by General Baratieri. The battle was started by the Italian commander Baratieri because he was given orders by the Italian Prime Minister Crispi to start the war quickly. The battle began at dawn on March 1st, 1896. The battle lasted for one full day. The result of the battle was unexpected and surprising to the world. The well-trained and well-armed Italian force was defeated by the ill-trained and not well-armed Ethiopian force. Interesting that they would say that. They said it was surprising to the world, okay, but they're saying Italy was well-trained and well-armed, and that Ethiopia was not well-trained and not well-armed. Ethiopia was victorious because of her people's high degree of courage and the full support of the people. Okay, so this is a little bit of nationalism here. And I'm not saying the Ethiopians shouldn't be proud, but what they're saying is, oh, we won because we have courage and a big heart. Well, and we had the support of the people. Look, that's certainly a factor, but you are not going to defeat an army with guns when you're showing up with wooden swords. You know, the weapons that they had to have mattered. In the other textbook, when they mention the modern arsenal, I think that has to be a factor. So, but keep reading. Moreover, Ethiopian women supplied water and arms to the fighters. Aha, that's a huge advantage. Because this is being fought in Ethiopia, the women could participate. They weren't going off to war in those days. Excuse me. And the Italians certainly didn't have any of their women joining them to do this. The Ethiopian women are able to help out the soldiers, supplying guns and supplying water. Okay, they carried the wounded to camps and encouraged the fighters to fight with great courage. So a little bit of this is Ethiopia won because we're strong and we have courage, but another part of it is they had the advantage of being at home, having the women involved, having the women give them water and arms, carrying the men off to the camp if they were injured, and just inspiring the fighters. I have no doubt that doesn't play a factor, But I would also say that the American textbook had some interesting points in it too. So when we wrap this all up, how did Ethiopia defeat Italy at the Battle of Adwa? It sounds like Menelik was a good emperor, a smart emperor. He knew how to play these European nations in a way that kept them away from Ethiopia. He got modern weapons from the French and the Russians, and the fact that Ethiopians were at home and got their women involved allowed them to defeat the Italians here. So that's ultimately what I would say, and I want you to write this in 10 to 15 sentences. But what do you think? What do you think was the reason that the Ethiopians were able to to defeat the Italians in the Battle of Adwa? Use the information we've gone over in this video. That's all you need. And if you're struggling with something, send me an email. Come to the Zoom class. Ask a question. I'm more than happy to help. I know this seems complicated, but what I'm trying to do is take the complicated and make it less complicated for you. And I think that's going to serve you well going forward. Any questions you have, ask me and tell me, what do you think happened at the Battle of Adwa based on the evidence we've been presented? Don't forget to try and include quotes as evidence. See you later, and I look forward to reading what you write.